The Nevada sun beat down on Nellis Air Force Base as crowds gathered for the annual Thunder Over the Desert air show, but all eyes were fixed on the impossible sight unfolding in the sky above. An F-35 Lightning II, America's most advanced fighter jet, had just broken formation and was now flying patterns that defied both physics and military protocol. The pilot, according to every official record, had been dead for 10 years. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Families spread colorful blankets across the viewing area, while veterans adjusted their caps and shared stories with anyone willing to listen. The smell of cotton candy mixed with jet fuel created that distinctly American military festival atmosphere that drew patriots from across the country. But Olivia Marshall wasn't there for the spectacle. She stood alone near the outer perimeter fence, arms crossed, auburn hair pulled back in a precise bun that somehow looked both civilian and military at once. Her dark jeans and olive jacket gave nothing away, but something about her posture. Shoulders level, weight evenly distributed, spine straight without being rigid, caught the attention of anyone who'd spent time around career military personnel. "Check out the lady by the fence," muttered Airman First Class Diego Torres to his buddy as they sipped sodas near the bleachers. "She's been standing there for an hour. Hasn't moved, hasn't taken a single photo." His friend Mike looked over and shrugged. "Probably just some aviation geek. My brother's like that. Obsessed with planes, but weird about crowds." But Diego kept watching. There was something about the way this woman tracked aircraft across the sky. Not like a hobbyist or even a spouse waiting for their pilot to fly over. She read the movements like she was calculating speed, altitude, and tactical formations. Her blue eyes never blinked, never wavered from the horizon. 3 rows up in the VIP section, General Frank Donovan lowered his binoculars and frowned. 30 years in the Air Force had taught him to notice things that didn't fit patterns, and this woman was definitely off pattern. No credentials, no escort, no visible reason to have clearance for this viewing area. Yet somehow she'd positioned herself exactly where someone with tactical knowledge would want to stand. "Lieutenant Cooper," he called to his aide without taking his eyes off the woman, "run a quick background check on the redhead by the west fence. Something feels wrong." "Sir, do you think she's a threat?" "I think she doesn't belong here," Donovan replied quietly. "And in my experience, that either means everything or nothing." Down on the tarmac, the pre-show formations were running their final practice runs. 2 F-16s screamed overhead in perfect synchronization, followed by a vintage P-51 Mustang that drew cheers from the crowd. But Olivia's attention wasn't on the show aircraft. She was watching the background, the support planes, the maintenance crews moving with practiced efficiency around a sleek, angular shape that sat like a sleeping predator in the restricted hangar area. The F-35 Lightning II, the most advanced fighter in the American arsenal, worth more than most small countries' entire defense budgets, and scheduled to make its star appearance in exactly 42 minutes. A maintenance technician named Ryan Matthews happened to be walking past the fence line when he noticed her. Something about her stillness made him pause and follow her gaze toward the hangar he'd been working in. "Ma'am," he called out, approaching the fence. "You doing okay? You've been standing there a while." Olivia turned toward him, and for just a moment, Ryan caught something in her expression that made his breath catch. Not the excitement of a civilian seeing military hardware up close, not even the professional interest of someone in the industry. It was recognition, like she was looking at something that belonged to her. "Just waiting," she said simply, her voice carrying the slight rasp of someone who'd spent years shouting over jet engines. "Waiting for what?" She smiled then, but it wasn't entirely pleasant. "For them to remember." Before Ryan could ask what that meant, the loudspeaker crackled to life. "Ladies and gentlemen, in 30 minutes, you'll witness the lightning speed of our F-35 Lightning II fighter, escorted by 4 F-22 Raptors, in a precision formation that showcases the technological superiority of American air power." The crowd cheered and shifted forward, phones and cameras raised. Olivia didn't move. She just kept staring at that hangar, and Ryan found himself wondering why watching her made his skin crawl with anticipation. In the control tower, Lieutenant Cooper returned to General Donovan with a tablet full of search results. "Sir, I can't find anything on her. No matches in our visitor database, no military ID in the system, no press credentials. It's like she doesn't exist." Donovan felt a cold knot forming in his stomach. In his experience, People who didn't exist in military databases fell into two categories: deep cover intelligence operatives, or ghosts who were supposed to stay buried. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. "Keep watching her," he ordered. "And Lieutenant, alert security to be ready, but do not approach unless I give the direct order." As the minutes ticked down to the main event, Olivia finally moved, just slightly. Her right hand brushed against the hem of her jacket, revealing for the briefest moment a small black patch sewn into the lining. It showed a winged silhouette that no civilian would recognize, but every fighter pilot in the Air Force would know by heart. The patch of someone who'd flown missions that officially never happened, someone who'd been erased from the records, someone who was about to remind the world that the dead don't always stay buried. The F-35's engine started with a sound like distant thunder. Even from half a mile away, the crowd could feel the vibration in their chests as the massive fighter powered up for its demonstration flight. Children pressed their hands to their ears while adults leaned forward, trying to catch a glimpse of the legendary aircraft through the heat shimmer rising from the tarmac. Olivia felt it differently. The sound hit her not just as noise, but as memory. Her hands, still crossed over her chest, trembled almost imperceptibly as muscle memory tried to reach for controls that weren't there, execute pre-flight checks she hadn't performed in over a decade. In the F-35's cockpit, Major Samantha Collins ran through her final systems check with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd logged over 400 hours in the Lightning. The aircraft represented the pinnacle of American aerial technology, a perfect fusion of stealth, speed, and lethality. "Tower, this is Echo 1. All systems green. Ready for demonstration pattern," Park spoke into her headset. "Copy Echo 1. You're cleared for takeoff. Execute pattern Foxtrot 6 as briefed." But as Collins advanced the throttles and felt the aircraft's powerful engine spool up to full power, something on her peripheral display caught her attention. A small icon had appeared in the lower right corner of her tactical screen, something she'd never seen in all her time flying the F-35. "Tower, you seeing this?" She tapped the display. "What's that symbol?" The tower operator leaned closer to his monitor and frowned. The icon was barely visible, just a small designation that read, "Legacy Protocol, Standby." It pulsed once, faintly, then remained steady. "Never seen that before," he admitted. "Could be some kind of software glitch from the recent upgrades." What neither of them knew was that buried deep in the F-35's original programming, installed during its first production run, were several recognition protocols designed to activate only under extremely specific circumstances. One of them was triggered by biometric signatures, heat patterns, vocal stress analysis, and electromagnetic field recognition of personnel who'd been encoded into the aircraft's memory during its testing phase. Personnel like Olivia Marshall, except the system knew her by a different name: Captain Sarah Anderson, test pilot, cleared for black operations, presumed killed in action 2015. Down on the ground, General Donovan watched through his binoculars as the F-35 taxied toward the runway. His aide, Lieutenant Cooper, had returned with more troubling news. "Sir, I ran deeper searches on our mystery woman. No active military records, but I found something interesting. There's a gap in our pilot archives from 2013 to 2015. Several files that were classified so high they don't even show up as redacted. They're just missing." "Missing how? Like they were deliberately removed, not archived, not transferred to other agencies, deleted. And, sir," Davidson hesitated, "the security footage from today's entrance gates shows her walking in, but we have no record of any credentials being scanned. It's like the system recognized her and just let her through." Donovan lowered his binoculars and turned to face his aide. "Are you telling me our security system has a ghost protocol?" Before Cooper could answer, the F-35 lifted off the runway with supernatural grace. Unlike conventional aircraft that fought their way into the air, the Lightning seemed to simply detach from the earth, rising on invisible currents like something that had never quite belonged to the ground anyway. Olivia watched the takeoff with an expression that shifted almost imperceptibly from stillness to something deeper. Not sadness exactly, but the complex emotion of someone seeing a lost love from a distance, knowing they could never again have what they'd once held. The F-35 banked left, its escort of F-22s falling into perfect formation around it. The crowd erupted in cheers as the 5 aircraft began their demonstration pattern, a carefully choreographed dance designed to showcase American air superiority to both allies and enemies who might be watching. But something was wrong. Major Collins felt at first a subtle change in the aircraft's responsiveness, as if the flight control system was remembering something. The stick felt looser in her hands, the aircraft's reactions more intuitive, like it was flying itself according to patterns she hadn't programmed. Tower, this is Echo 1. I'm showing some unusual system behavior. Request permission to extend pattern and run diagnostics. Negative Echo 1. Maintain scheduled demonstration profile. But even as Collins acknowledged the order, she noticed something else on her display. The legacy protocol icon was no longer just standby. It now read Recognition Complete, Phoenix Authorization Active. Phoenix. That was a code name she'd heard whispered in pilot briefings, but never seen in official documentation. Something from the black programs, the operations that didn't exist on paper. On the ground, Olivia took a step forward. For the first time since arriving at the base, she moved with purpose, walking slowly but deliberately toward the flight line. Security personnel noticed the movement, hands moving instinctively toward their radios, but General Donovan's voice crackled through their earpieces. Do not interfere. Observe only. Because Donovan was beginning to understand. The mysterious woman, the missing records, the F-35's unusual behavior. It was all connected. Someone who'd been erased from the system was announcing her return, and she was doing it in the only way that made sense, through the aircraft that had once been hers. In the sky above Nellis, Major Collins felt the F-35 subtly alter course, not enough to violate her flight plan, but enough to bring the formation directly over the woman walking across the tarmac. And as they passed overhead, the aircraft did something that should have been impossible. It waggled its wings. Just once. Barely perceptible to the crowd, but unmistakable to anyone who understood aviation. A salute. The crowd gasped, not understanding what they just witnessed, but sensing its significance. Cameras clicked and phones recorded as the F-35 continued its pattern, the 4 F-22s maintaining perfect formation around it. Olivia had stopped walking. She stood in the middle of the tarmac now, no longer hiding at the edges, no longer invisible. She raised one hand to her forehead in a crisp military salute, holding it as the formation completed its pass, and banked for the next leg of the demonstration. General Donovan lowered his binoculars and felt a chill run down his spine, because in that moment, he finally understood what he was looking at. Not a security threat, not a confused civilian who'd wandered into the wrong area. A ghost pilot saying hello to her old aircraft. And judging by the F-35's response, the aircraft remembered her too. The formation completed its second pass, and Major Collins knew something was seriously wrong. The F-35's flight management system was no longer responding to her inputs the way it should. Instead, it seemed to be flying according to some deeper programming, some protocol she'd never been trained on. Tower, she said to her radio. I'm going to need you to manually check the override systems. Something's executing commands I'm not giving. The tower operator's fingers flew over his console, but what he found made his blood run cold. Ma'am, the aircraft is accessing archived flight patterns. These aren't in our current database. They're from... Jesus, these files are over 10 years old. On the ground, Olivia had reached the center of the demonstration area. Security personnel surrounded her now, but at a respectful distance, their weapons holstered, their postures more confused than threatening. General Donovan had made it clear they were to observe, not engage, but everyone could feel the tension building like electricity before a storm. Lieutenant Cooper approached Donovan, his face pale. Sir, I've been coordinating with Pentagon Archives. We found something. There was a pilot named Sarah Anderson, matches our subject's facial recognition with 97% certainty. She was killed in a training accident in 2015. Aircraft lost over the Gulf of Mexico. Killed, Donovan repeated, never taking his eyes off the woman standing calmly in the middle of his airfield. That's what the record says. Closed casket funeral. No remains recovered. But, sir, Davidson hesitated, the accident report is classified at a level I've never seen before. And the investigating officer's final note just says, truth will surface when needed. Donovan felt pieces of a puzzle clicking together in his mind, forming a picture he didn't like. What was she flying when she allegedly died? An F-35 prototype, sir. Solo training mission. Lost contact over international waters. Above them, the formation was beginning its final demonstration pass when Major Collins felt the aircraft make a decision without her. The F-35 suddenly broke formation, banking sharply to the right and losing altitude. The four F-22 escorts struggled to maintain position as their lead aircraft deviated completely from the planned flight path. Echo 1. You're off course. The tower's voice crackled with alarm. Return to formation immediately. Tower. This is Echo 1. I am not in control of this deviation. Repeat. I am not executing this maneuver. The crowd's cheers turned to murmurs of confusion as the massive fighter descended toward the airfield, clearly preparing for an unscheduled landing. But this wasn't an emergency landing. The aircraft's approach was too smooth, too controlled, too deliberate. Olivia watched the F-35 descend toward her with an expression of profound sadness mixed with something that might have been vindication. As the aircraft passed overhead, she could see the pilot's helmeted figure through the cockpit glass, could imagine her confusion and fear as her aircraft responded to commands she couldn't understand. She knew that feeling. She'd lived it for 3 years before they tried to bury her along with the truth. General Donovan grabbed his radio. All units stand down. Do not attempt to interfere with the aircraft. I repeat, do not engage. Sir, Cooper protested, that's a $100 million aircraft landing without authorization. We have protocols. The protocols, Donovan said grimly, don't cover this situation. The F-35 touched down with the grace of a falling feather, its landing gear absorbing the impact so smoothly it barely seemed to have made contact with the runway. The aircraft taxied slowly, deliberately, toward the demonstration area where Olivia stood waiting. Major Collins worked frantically at her controls, but the aircraft was no longer responding to any of her inputs. It was as if the F-35 had remembered something more important than current orders, something that overrode every safety protocol and command hierarchy. Tower, be advised I have completely lost control of this aircraft. It appears to be operating under some kind of autonomous protocol. The F-35 came to a stop exactly 50 feet from where Olivia stood. The engines spooled down, but the aircraft systems remained active, humming with electronic life. For a long moment, nothing moved except the heat shimmer rising from the fighter's skin. Then Olivia began walking toward the aircraft. Security personnel tensed, hands moving toward weapons, but General Donovan's voice cut through their earpieces. Anyone who interferes will answer to me personally. She approached the F-35 like someone returning home after a long absence, her steps sure and unhurried. When she reached the aircraft's side, she placed one hand flat against its matte gray surface, and something extraordinary happened. The fighter's running lights flickered once, then settled into a steady pulse that matched the rhythm of a human heartbeat. Inside the cockpit, Major Collins stared at her instruments in disbelief. Every system on the aircraft was responding to this woman's presence, displays lighting up with information she'd never seen before, showing flight records and mission profiles that weren't supposed to exist. Tower? She whispered into her radio. Tell me you're recording this. But the tower operator was staring at his own displays, his face white with shock. Ma'am, the aircraft's computers are showing. They're showing that this woman is the primary authorized pilot for this airframe. According to the system, she outranks everyone currently in our chain of command. On the ground, Olivia stepped back from the aircraft and looked up at the crowd of officials and security personnel surrounding her. When she spoke, her voice carried clearly across the tarmac, amplified by the strange acoustic properties of the airfield. My name is Sarah Anderson, she said. Captain, United States Air Force, service number 2247, Golf November 84, Alpha. I was reported killed in action on June 12, 2015, while flying a classified mission in this aircraft. She gestured toward the F-35, which seemed to settle more firmly onto its landing gear, as if relaxing in her presence. The mission was successful. The aircraft returned safely, but the people who sent me decided that what I'd seen, what I'd accomplished, was too dangerous to acknowledge officially, so they buried me along with the truth. General Donovan stepped forward, his expression a mixture of amazement and growing understanding. Captain Anderson, if that's who you are, you've been dead for 10 years. How is that possible? Sarah smiled, and for the first time there was real warmth in her expression. Because sometimes, General, the only way to survive in this business is to let them think you're dead. She turned back to the F-35, which had begun to power up its engines again, as if preparing for departure. But today, I decided it was time to come home. The crowd had grown silent, sensing they were witnessing something beyond a simple airshow demonstration. Camera phones captured every moment as Sarah Anderson stood beside the F-35 Lightning, like a ghost made flesh, her hands still resting on the aircraft's hull as its systems hummed in recognition. General Donovan approached slowly, his mind racing through implications and possibilities. If this woman was who she claimed to be, if she was really Captain Sarah Anderson, then someone very high up the chain of command had some serious explaining to do. "Captain," he said carefully, "I'm going to need to see some identification." Sarah reached into her jacket and withdrew something that made Donovan's blood run cold, a military ID card that showed her photo but was printed on the old format used over a decade ago. The clearance level listed was one he'd only heard whispered about in classified briefings, Black Ops Level 6. "Stealth Operations Atlantic Theater," she said simply. "You won't find my missions in any database you have access to, General. They exist only in systems so classified they don't officially exist." Lieutenant Cooper had been quietly coordinating with various agencies through his secure tablet. Now he approached Donovan with an expression of barely controlled panic. "Sir, I've been in contact with the Pentagon. They want to speak with you immediately." Scrambled blind? Highest priority. Sarah overheard him and laughed, a sound with no humor in it. "Let me guess. Some very nervous people in very expensive suits are suddenly very interested in this conversation." She turned to address Donovan directly. "General, before you take that call, let me ask you something. Do you know what Operation Midnight Falcon was?" Donovan frowned. The name sounded familiar, something from the deep classified briefings he received when first promoted to general rank. But the details were fuzzy. "I've heard the designation." "Of course you have. Because 10 years ago, I flew an F-35 into Iranian airspace, alone and unescorted, to photograph nuclear facilities that officially don't exist. The mission lasted 14 hours. I refueled in mid-air from a tanker that was never logged, flew through air defense systems that couldn't detect me, and brought back intelligence that prevented a war." The crowd around them had grown larger, drawn by the surreal scene of a lone woman lecturing military brass beside a fighter that had apparently landed itself. Media personnel were pushing forward, sensing a story that would make careers. "The problem," Sarah continued, "was that some of what I photographed implicated American companies in illegal weapons sales. People who had assumed their activities would remain hidden behind classified operations suddenly found themselves very exposed." Major Collins's voice crackled through the F-35's external speakers, which had somehow activated without her input. "Ma'am, are you saying this aircraft has autonomous capabilities we weren't briefed on?" Sarah looked up at the cockpit windows, where she could see the pilot staring down at her in amazement. "What I'm saying, Major, is that this aircraft knows who its real pilot is. The question is whether the Air Force is ready to acknowledge that." General Donovan's secure phone was buzzing insistently. He answered it, stepping a few feet away. But Sarah's enhanced hearing, trained through years of cockpit operations in high-noise environments, caught fragments of the conversation. "Immediate containment, national security implications cannot allow public exposure." She smiled grimly and called out to him. "Are they ordering you to arrest me?" Donovan paused in his conversation, looking back at her with an expression that mixed respect with growing concern. Into the phone, he said, "I'll call you back," and ended the call. "Captain Anderson, I'm going to be straight with you. There are people who consider your presence here to be a significant security risk. Of course they do, because I'm proof that our government has been lying to the families of service members for over a decade. I'm proof that missions are being flown without congressional oversight. I am proof that when inconvenient truths surface, the preferred solution is to make the truth-tellers disappear." She gestured toward the F-35, whose engines were now cycling through what sounded like a pre-flight sequence. "But they made one mistake, General. They assumed I'd stay buried." A commotion near the perimeter caught everyone's attention. A convoy of black SUVs was approaching at high speed, their emergency lights flashing. Sarah watched them with the calm expression of someone who had been expecting this moment for years. "Those would be my old friends from the Special Activities Division," she said conversationally. "They're probably here to remind everyone that this conversation never happened." Lieutenant Cooper moved closer to Donovan. "Sir, what are your orders?" But before Donovan could respond, Sarah had moved to the F-35's entry ladder, which had extended automatically as she approached. She looked back at the crowd of officials, media, and onlookers who had gathered to witness her resurrection. "General, I spent 10 years dead, watching from the shadows as this aircraft flew missions with pilots who were never told its full capabilities, watching as families were told their loved ones died in training accidents, when they actually died, protecting American interests in conflicts that don't exist." She began climbing the ladder toward the cockpit. "Today I'm taking my aircraft home. And tomorrow the world is going to learn the truth about what's been done in their name." The black SUVs were close now, their occupants certainly armed with orders that didn't include allowing Sarah Anderson to simply fly away. But as she reached the cockpit and began to enter, the F-35's defensive systems activated with a sound like a giant electronic sigh. Every electronic device within 100 yards suddenly went dead. Cell phones, cameras, radio equipment, even the approaching vehicle's engines simply shut down as the fighter's electromagnetic warfare suite engaged in what could only be described as a protective mode. In the sudden silence that followed, Sarah's voice carried clearly across the airfield. "Some secrets, General, are too important to stay buried." As the F-35's canopy sealed shut, Major Collins found herself face to face with the woman who had just upended everything she thought she knew about military aviation. Sarah Anderson moved through the cramped cockpit with the fluid efficiency of someone who had spent thousands of hours in this exact space, her hands automatically finding switches and controls without looking. "Major," she said to the bewildered pilot, "I suggest you prepare for immediate departure. We have about 90 seconds before the electromagnetic pulse I just triggered wears off, and our friends in the black SUVs remember how to use their radios." "Ma'am," Major Collins managed, "I can't allow unauthorized personnel to." Sarah was already in the pilot's seat, her fingers dancing across controls with a familiarity that made the younger pilot step back in amazement. The aircraft systems responded to her touch like a favorite instrument responding to a master musician. "Major, according to this aircraft's computers, I have override authority that supersedes any current chain of command. Now, you can either strap in and learn something about how this bird really flies, or you can climb down that ladder and explain to your superiors why you let a $100 million aircraft depart without you." Collins stared at the woman who had emerged from the dead. "Are you really who you say you are?" Sarah glanced back at her, and in that moment, the younger pilot saw something in her eyes that answered the question completely. The look of someone who had flown alone into the darkest corners of the world and returned with secrets that could topple governments. "Major, I named this aircraft. I helped design its stealth capabilities. I flew the first combat mission it ever completed, and according to the official record, I died in its cockpit." She turned back to the controls as the engine spooled up to full power. "So yes, I'm exactly who I say I am." On the ground, General Donovan watched in fascination and growing alarm as the F-35 prepared for an unauthorized takeoff. The black SUVs had coasted to a stop when their engines died, and figures in dark suits were climbing out, speaking urgently into dead radio handsets. One of them, a woman in her 50s with the bearing of someone accustomed to being obeyed, approached Donovan with unconcealed fury. "General, I am Deputy Director Victoria Hayes, CIA Special Activities Division. You will order that aircraft to shut down immediately." Donovan looked at her with the expression of a career military officer who had just realized he was in the middle of something much larger than his pay grade. "Ma'am, with respect, I don't have the authority to override a Level 6 clearance. That clearance was revoked when she died." "Apparently," Donovan said dryly, "she got better." The F-35 was moving now, taxiing toward the runway with the serene confidence of an aircraft that belonged in the sky. Inside the cockpit, Sarah was running through pre-flight checks with a speed that amazed the legitimate pilot. "How are you doing this so fast?" Major Collins asked. "Because I helped write the procedures you've been following," Sarah replied without looking up from her instruments. "And because this aircraft and I have an understanding." As if to prove her point, the F-35's navigation system automatically plotted a course that Collins had never programmed, displaying a flight path that seemed to head toward no particular destination. "Where are we going?" Collins asked. Sarah smiled, and for the first time it was a genuinely happy expression. "Home!" To the place where this all started. The F-35 reached the runway and, without requesting clearance from the tower, began its takeoff roll. The massive fighter accelerated with the whisper-quiet grace that had made it legendary, lifting off the runway and climbing steeply into the afternoon sky. On the ground, Deputy Director Hayes was screaming orders at subordinates, who were frantically trying to restore their electronic equipment. "Get NORAD on the line. I want that aircraft tracked by every satellite we have. And someone get me the Pentagon. We have a security breach of the highest magnitude." But General Donovan was watching the F-35 disappear into the distance with a growing sense that he was witnessing something historic. This wasn't just a security breach or a rogue pilot stealing military hardware. This was a reckoning 10 years in the making. His aide, Lieutenant Cooper, approached with a restored tablet, his face pale. "Sir, I've been researching Operation Midnight Falcon. What Captain Anderson said about Iran, about preventing a war, it's all true. The intelligence she gathered led to the exposure of an illegal weapons trafficking network that went all the way to Congress. And the people involved, 2 representatives, 3 defense contractors, and a CIA deputy director." Cooper paused meaningfully, all of whom are still alive, still in positions of power, and all of whom had every reason to want Sarah Anderson permanently silenced. Donovan felt the last pieces of the puzzle clicking into place. She wasn't killed in a training accident. She was murdered to protect the conspiracy. "That's what it looks like, sir." And now she's back, flying the aircraft that contains the proof. High above Nevada, Sarah Anderson was finally home. The F-35 responded to her commands like an extension of her own body, climbing through cloud layers toward the high-altitude realm where stealth fighters ruled supreme. In the co-pilot seat, Major Collins was recording everything on the aircraft's internal systems, instinctively understanding that she was witnessing history. "Captain Anderson," she said, "what really happened to you 10 years ago?" Sarah was quiet for a long moment, her eyes fixed on the horizon ahead. When she finally spoke, her voice carried the weight of years spent in exile. "I completed the mission, Major. I brought back proof that American weapons were being sold to Iran through back channels. Proof that high-ranking officials were profiting from technologies that could be used against our own troops. But when I landed, instead of being debriefed, I was arrested." She adjusted their altitude, climbing higher into the thin air where only the most advanced aircraft could operate. "They told me I had 2 choices. Sign a classified agreement to never speak about what I'd seen, accept a desk job, and keep quiet for the rest of my career, or face court-martial for violating operational security. What did you choose?" Sarah's smile was sharp as a blade. "I chose a third option. I stole this aircraft and disappeared into the night. But the official report said you died in a training accident. Because that was easier for everyone involved. Dead pilots don't testify before Congress. Dead pilots don't write memoirs. Dead pilots don't embarrass people who thought they could get away with treason as long as it was classified." The F-35 was approaching its cruising altitude now, invisible to most radar systems, a dark angel moving through the sky toward a destination that existed only in Sarah Anderson's memory and the aircraft's deepest navigation files. "So where have you been for 10 years?" Major Collins asked. Sarah turned to look at her, and her expression was that of someone who had spent years preparing for exactly this moment. "Major, I've been getting ready to tell the world the truth." 15,000 feet above the Nevada desert, Sarah Anderson executed a maneuver that shouldn't have been possible in an F-35 Lightning II. The massive fighter rolled inverted and held the position for exactly 12 seconds before smoothly returning to level flight, a display of piloting skill that left Major Collins speechless. "The manuals say this aircraft can't do that," Collins managed after finding her voice. "The manuals," Sarah replied with a hint of amusement, "don't know everything this aircraft can do. There are capabilities built into the F-35 that were never documented, never shared with operational pilots. Capabilities that could change the nature of aerial warfare if they fell into the wrong hands." She was heading toward a specific coordinate, one that didn't appear on any aviation chart, but was burned into her memory from a night 10 years ago when she discovered that her own government was willing to kill her to protect its secrets. Behind them, the sky was filling with interceptor aircraft. F-22 Raptors launched from Nellis and Edwards Air Force Bases were struggling to match the F-35 speed and altitude, while AWACS aircraft coordinated a search pattern that couldn't quite lock onto their position. Lightning 1. "This is Watchdog," crackled through the radio. "You are ordered to return to base immediately. Failure to comply will result in extreme measures." Sarah keyed her microphone. "Watchdog, this is Captain Sarah Anderson. Service number 2247, Gulf November 84, Alpha. I am conducting authorized flight operations under Protocol Black Falcon. Access code November 7, Alpha Phoenix Rising." A long pause then. Lightning 1. "There is no such protocol. Watchdog, check your Tier 6 archives. The protocol was installed by direct presidential order in 2012. In the AWACS aircraft coordinating the intercept, a technician frantically searched through classified databases while his commanding officer watched the F-35's track on radar. When the search results appeared on his screen, the technician's face went white. Sir, the protocol exists. It grants autonomous operational authority to designated pilots in the event of—" He stopped, reading further. "Oh my God! In the event of what, Sergeant?" "In the event of confirmed treasonous activity by personnel with Tier 5 clearance or higher, sir. The protocol authorizes the designated pilot to take any action necessary to preserve national security, including violation of standard operational parameters." The commanding officer stared at his screen in disbelief. "Are you telling me this pilot has presidential authorization to do whatever she wants?" "Sir, according to this file, Captain Sarah Anderson was given that authorization after completing a classified mission that exposed weapons trafficking by high-ranking officials. The protocol was designed to protect her in case those officials tried to silence her. But she's been dead for 10 years. Sir," the technician said quietly, "maybe she hasn't." High above the desert, Sarah was approaching her destination, a seemingly empty stretch of land that had once housed a secret testing facility. To the naked eye, there was nothing there but sand and scrub brush. But the F-35's advanced sensors were painting a different picture, showing underground structures that still hummed with electronic life. "Major Collins," Sarah said, studying her instruments, "there's a massive installation down there. It's not on any of our charts." "It wouldn't be, Major. That facility officially doesn't exist. But it's where this aircraft was really born, and it's where the evidence of the conspiracy is stored." She began a descent toward what appeared to be empty desert, but was actually a runway hidden beneath retractable camouflage. As they approached, sections of the ground began to slide away, revealing a landing strip that could accommodate the nation's largest military aircraft. "My God," Collins whispered. "How many facilities like this are there?" "More than you'd want to know," Sarah replied grimly, "and fewer than there used to be, thanks to budget cuts and the people who thought burying the truth was cheaper than protecting it." The F-35 touched down on the hidden runway with Sarah's characteristic precision. As they taxied toward an underground hangar, Collins noticed something that made her blood run cold. Other aircraft were parked in the shadows, aircraft that, according to all official records, had been destroyed or lost in accidents. "Those planes, they're supposed to be dead, like me," Sarah finished. "Welcome to the graveyard of inconvenient truths, Major." The hangar doors closed above them, sealing the F-35 and its crew in a facility that didn't exist on any government database. Sarah powered down the engines and unbuckled her harness, moving with the purposeful efficiency of someone who had planned this moment for 10 years. "Major, what you're about to see will fundamentally change your understanding of how our government operates. You have a choice. You can come with me and learn the truth, or you can stay with the aircraft and continue believing the comfortable lies." Collins looked at Sarah, then back at the mysterious aircraft surrounding them. Her entire career had been built on following orders, on trusting the chain of command, but she'd also sworn an oath to the Constitution, to protect America from all enemies, foreign and domestic. "Ma'am, I'm with you." Sarah smiled, and for the first time since they'd met, it was a smile that suggested hope rather than vengeance. "Then welcome to the real war, Major. The one fought by people who swore an oath to protect the Constitution, even when the Constitution needs protection from its own government. She led Collins to a security panel beside the aircraft and placed her palm on a scanner that immediately recognized her biometrics. Lights began flickering on throughout the facility, illuminating corridors and chambers that had been dark for years. "This is where the real records are kept," Sarah explained as they walked through passages lined with filing cabinets and computer servers. Every black operation, every classified mission, every piece of evidence that certain people hoped would stay buried forever. They entered a control room that looked like something from a science fiction movie, filled with screens displaying real-time intelligence from around the world. Sarah moved to a central console and began entering commands that brought the entire facility online. "For 10 years I've been gathering evidence, building cases, documenting crimes. But I needed the perfect moment to reveal it all. Today, when I proved that I'm still alive, that moment arrived." Screens around the room began displaying documents, photographs, and video recordings. Bank transfers showing weapons sales to hostile nations, congressional testimony that had been classified to hide corruption, orders signed by high-ranking officials authorizing the elimination of inconvenient witnesses. "Dear God," Collins breathed, staring at a video of a congressional hearing where a defense secretary lied under oath about weapons trafficking. "How long has this been going on?" "Decades," Sarah replied. "But it accelerated after 9/11, when the increased secrecy made it easier to hide criminal activity behind national security classifications." Collins was studying a financial document that showed millions of dollars being transferred from defense contractors to numbered accounts. "This is enough to bring down half of Washington." "That's the idea, Major. But first, we need to make sure it reaches the right people." Sarah activated a communications array that began broadcasting on frequencies used by major news organizations, congressional oversight committees, and international intelligence agencies. The evidence that had been hidden for 10 years was now flooding into the public sphere. "Ladies and gentlemen," she said into a microphone connected to the broadcast system, "my name is Captain Sarah Anderson, United States Air Force. I've been officially dead for 10 years. But I've spent that time documenting a conspiracy that goes to the highest levels of our government. On screens around the world, in newsrooms and government offices, people stopped what they were doing to listen to the voice of a ghost who had returned to expose the truth. What you're about to see is evidence of weapons trafficking, murder, and treason committed by people who swore an oath to protect our nation. They tried to silence me once. Today, I'm making sure they can never silence anyone again." The data dump began. Gigabytes of classified information flowing into databases and news servers around the globe. In Washington, alarms were going off in offices where officials suddenly realized that their darkest secrets were about to become front-page news. Sarah looked at the pilot who had followed her into this hidden world of truth and consequences. "Major, welcome to the revolution." But even as the evidence began to circulate, something urgent appeared on one of the monitoring screens. A terrorist alert from the Department of Homeland Security. Sarah froze, her attention immediately captured by the details scrolling across the display. "No," she whispered, her face suddenly pale. "Not now." Collins moved to her side, reading the alert with growing horror. A terrorist cell had been activated within the United States. Intelligence indicated they had acquired a dirty bomb and were targeting a major population center. The threat level was critical. "How recent is this?" Collins asked. "It just came in," Sarah replied, fingers flying across the keyboard as she accessed deeper levels of intelligence. "This is real-time data from NSA intercepts. The attack is planned for today. We need to alert Homeland Security." "They already know," Sarah said grimly. "But look at the response protocols they are implementing." She highlighted a section of the report that detailed the government's planned response. Collins read it, her expression shifting from concern to disbelief. "They're going to let it happen? Why would they?" "Because," Sarah cut in, "a national emergency would be the perfect excuse to shut down the media coverage of my evidence. Look at the timing. This terror alert was issued exactly 17 minutes after my broadcast began. That's not a coincidence. You think they're using a terrorist attack as cover. I think they're willing to sacrifice American lives to protect themselves from exposure." Sarah's voice was cold with fury. "This is exactly why I've stayed hidden for 10 years. The people I exposed don't just break laws. They break the very foundation of what America stands for. She pulled up satellite imagery of a major East Coast city. Red indicators showed potential target locations for the dirty bomb. According to this intelligence, the attack is planned for New York City. The device is already in place, scheduled for detonation at 3 p.m. Eastern Time. Collins checked her watch. That's less than 2 hours from now. Sarah was already moving, heading back toward the F-35. We need to stop it. How? We're 2 people against a terrorist cell, and if what you're saying is true, our own government won't help us. Sarah looked back at her, determination burning in her eyes. Major, do you remember why you became a pilot? Collins didn't hesitate. To protect people who can't protect themselves. Exactly. That oath doesn't change just because the threat comes from within. Now, are you with me? Collins straightened her spine, her decision made. All the way, ma'am. Back in the F-35's cockpit, Sarah activated systems that Collins had never seen before. The aircraft's standard weapons control display was replaced by something far more sophisticated, showing options for electronic warfare, advanced targeting, and stealth operations that went beyond anything in the official manuals. This aircraft was designed with capabilities that were kept off the books, Sarah explained as they prepared for takeoff. Capabilities specifically created for situations where the chain of command has been compromised. The underground hangar doors slid open above them, revealing a patch of blue sky. The F-35's engines roared to life, pushing them back into their seats as they rocketed toward the surface. Our first priority is to locate the device, Sarah said as they climbed. The F-35 sensors can detect radiation signatures from 30,000 feet. We'll do a sweep of Manhattan, focusing on the most likely target areas: Grand Central, Times Square, the financial district. And once we find it? Sarah's expression was grim. Then we neutralize the terrorists and secure the device until we can get proper disposal teams in place. Without support from our own chain of command? I have contacts. People who've been working with me in the shadows for years. Former special forces, intelligence officers who discovered the same corruption I did. They're already mobilizing in New York. The F-35 leveled off at 50,000 feet, pushing the edge of supersonic as they headed east. Sarah activated a secure communications channel that bypassed normal military frequencies. Phoenix Nest. This is Lazarus. Authentication code Echo Tango-793. Resurrection protocol is active. A moment of silence, then a male voice responded. Lazarus, this is Phoenix Nest. Authentication confirmed. We have your position. Assets are being deployed to coordinates in New York City. What's your ETA? Approximately 30 minutes. We'll begin aerial reconnaissance immediately upon arrival. Understood. Be advised, Lazarus. Hostile elements are aware of your resurrection. All standard channels are compromised. Trust no one outside the nest. Copy that, Phoenix Nest. Lazarus out. Collins looked at Sarah with new understanding. You've been planning for this day. For 10 years, Sarah confirmed. When I discovered what was happening, I knew it wasn't just a few corrupt officials. It was systematic, reaching into every branch of government and military. So I built my own network. People who still believe in what America stands for, who are willing to risk everything to protect it. Like the Underground Railroad, Sarah nodded. Exactly like that. People who help others disappear when they discover truths that powerful people want to remain hidden. The fighter jets streaked across America, covering ground at nearly twice the speed of sound. On the radar display, Collins could see other aircraft being diverted away from their path. Air traffic control clearing the skies without knowing why. That's Phoenix Nest's work, Sarah explained. We have people in every major system: air traffic control, power grids, communications networks. People who can make things happen without raising alarms. As they approached the East Coast, Sarah activated the F-35's advanced sensor suite. The aircraft's skin began to pulse with energy as it scanned for the unique radiation signature of a dirty bomb. Major, take the controls. I need to coordinate with our ground team. Collins took over, guiding the stealth fighter in a precise grid pattern over Manhattan while Sarah communicated with her network of allies. The city sprawled beneath them, millions of people going about their daily lives, unaware of the danger lurking in their midst. We've got something, Collins said suddenly, as the sensor display lit up with a warning. Radiation signature, consistent with cesium-137. Financial district, near the stock exchange. Sarah immediately switched back to her secure channel. Phoenix Nest, we have a positive ID. Sending coordinates now. Radiation signature suggests a cesium-based dirty bomb, likely with conventional explosives as a dispersal mechanism. Copy that, Lazarus. Ground team is 7 minutes out. Can you maintain aerial surveillance? Affirmative. We'll keep eyes on target. Collins banked the aircraft, bringing them into a tight holding pattern over the financial district. What's the plan once your ground team arrives? They'll secure the device and neutralize any hostiles. Our job is to provide them with real-time intelligence and, if necessary, tactical support. Tactical support? From an F-35? Sarah's smile was cold. This aircraft has capabilities that would make most Special Forces teams jealous. We can jam communications, disable electronics, create diversions. Everything short of firing weapons in a civilian area. On the ground, they could see police and emergency vehicles beginning to converge on the financial district, not because of the bomb, but because of routine security protocols triggered by any unusual activity. That's going to complicate things, Collins observed. Not necessarily, Sarah replied. Our team knows how to work with first responders without revealing who they really are. The minutes ticked by with excruciating slowness. Through the F-35's advanced imaging systems, they could see figures moving through the streets below, ordinary citizens mixed with what appeared to be plainclothes security personnel. Phoenix Nest to Lazarus. Ground team has visual on target location. Confirmed 4 hostiles. Device appears to be in a delivery van parked outside the eastern entrance of the stock exchange. Timer visible through windshield, showing 17 minutes to detonation. Sarah's voice remained steady, though Collins could see her knuckles whitening on the control stick. Copy that, Phoenix Nest. What's your approach? Standard infiltration. Team 1 will secure the perimeter. Team 2 will neutralize hostiles. Team 3 will assess and disarm the device. Understood. We'll maintain overwatch and alert you to any additional hostiles entering the area. Sarah switched to a different channel. All Phoenix units, be advised. We have reason to believe elements within our own government may attempt to interfere with neutralization efforts. Trust only authenticated Phoenix personnel. As they watched, the ground team moved into position with the precision of elite Special Forces operators. From their vantage point 5,000 feet above, Sarah and Collins could see what the team on the ground couldn't. A second group of armed men approaching from the west, moving with military discipline. Phoenix Nest, be advised. Unknown armed group approaching from the west. 8 individuals, tactical formation, military-grade weapons. Not police or standard federal response. Copy, Lazarus. Can you identify? Sarah zoomed the camera feed, focusing on the patches and equipment of the approaching group. Her breath caught. Phoenix Nest. Incoming hostiles appear to be from Special Activities Division, CIA Direct Action Team. They're not here to help. Understood, Lazarus. Adjusting approach. Collins looked at Sarah in disbelief. This CIA is trying to ensure the attack succeeds? Not the CIA as an institution, Sarah clarified, her voice tight with controlled anger. But the corrupt elements within it, the same people who tried to bury me and the evidence I gathered, they can't afford to let this device be found and safely disabled. It would undermine the crisis they need to distract from my revelations. Below them, the 2 groups were on a collision course. Sarah's Phoenix team moving to secure the bomb, and the CIA team moving to ensure it detonated. We need to level the playing field, Sarah decided. She activated a system Collins had never seen before, the F-35's electronic warfare suite, but configured in a way that went far beyond standard military protocols. Cover your ears, Major. Sarah pressed a sequence of commands, and suddenly the F-35 emitted a focused electromagnetic pulse, invisible but devastatingly effective. On the ground, the CIA team's communications went dead, their night vision equipment flickered and died, and their tactical advantages evaporated in an instant. What did you just do? Collins asked in amazement. Targeted EMP, Sarah explained. Another one of this aircraft's undocumented features. It disables electronics within a precise radius without affecting critical infrastructure. With their technological edge neutralized, the CIA team hesitated, giving the Phoenix operatives the opening they needed. Sarah's people moved with practiced efficiency, securing the area around the van and approaching the device. Phoenix Nest to Lazarus. Hostiles contained. Device secured. Bomb disposal specialist is assessing now. Long seconds stretched into minutes as they watched the specialist work on the device. Finally, the update came. Device has been neutralized. Detonation mechanism disabled. Radioactive material secured. Sarah closed her eyes briefly, allowing herself a moment of relief. Good work, Phoenix Nest. Begin evacuation of the material to the secure facility. Full containment protocols. Copy that, Lazarus. And the other matter? Proceed as planned. The evidence is already in the public domain. Nothing can stop it now. Sarah leaned back in her seat, the tension of the last hour visible in the set of her shoulders. Major, we just prevented what would have been the deadliest terrorist attack on American soil since 9/11. Not just prevented it, Collins said, understanding dawning. We exposed a conspiracy within our own government to allow it to happen. The first of many truths that will come to light today. Sarah adjusted their course, heading back toward the west. Now comes the hard part, making sure those responsible face justice. Where are we going? Washington, D.C., Sarah replied. It's time to meet the people who tried to have me killed. As the F-35 banked toward the Capitol, Collins couldn't help but ask the question that had been building since this incredible day began. Captain Anderson, how many others are there? How many people like you, presumed dead but actually working to expose these conspiracies? Sarah's expression softened slightly. More than you'd think, Major. When a system becomes corrupted from within, the only people who can fight it effectively are those the system believes it has already eliminated. Ghosts, Collins said quietly. Exactly. We're the ghosts of American honor, haunting those who betrayed their oaths. Sarah checked their heading as Washington appeared on the horizon. And today, we stop haunting and start hunting. The F-35 streaked toward the Capitol, carrying two pilots united by a common purpose, to protect the nation they had sworn to defend, even when the threat came from within. Behind them, in New York, Sarah's team was securing evidence that would expose one of the darkest conspiracies in American history. Ahead of them lay a confrontation a decade in the making, with people powerful enough to fake a pilot's death and nearly sacrifice a city to protect their secrets. Are you ready for this, Major? Sarah asked, as the Pentagon came into view below them. Collins nodded, her resolve hardening. Yes, ma'am. It's time for the dead to speak. The stealth fighter descended toward Washington, carrying its message of resurrection and reckoning. The war for America's soul had begun, led by a pilot who had returned from the dead to ensure that truth itself could not be buried. The F-35 approached Washington, D.C. at an altitude low enough to trigger every defense system in the nation's capital. Alerts blared across military channels as the stealth fighter violated restricted airspace. But Sarah Anderson wasn't concerned about the protocols she was breaking. When you've been dead for 10 years, regulations lose their power to intimidate. We're being painted by multiple targeting systems, Major Collins reported, watching the threat indicators multiply across her display. F-16s scrambling from Andrews. 6 minutes to intercept. Sarah nodded calmly. Expected. Don't worry, they won't fire. How can you be so sure? Because I'm broadcasting on frequencies they thought were buried with me. Frequencies that make certain people very, very nervous. The Pentagon loomed ahead, the massive, 5-sided building that housed the nerve center of American military might. Sarah adjusted their course, bringing the F-35 directly over the river entrance, where the highest-ranking officials had their offices. What exactly is your plan here? Collins asked, tension evident in her voice. Making a statement, Sarah replied. And forcing a conversation that's 10 years overdue. She activated the aircraft's external speakers, another capability that wasn't in any official manual, and her voice boomed across the Pentagon courtyard, causing startled officials to look skyward, This is Captain Sarah Anderson, service number 2247, Golf November 84 Alpha. 10 years ago, I was declared killed in action after discovering a conspiracy that reaches to the highest levels of government. Today, I prevented a terrorist attack that certain officials were willing to allow in order to distract from evidence I've released exposing their crimes. Inside the Pentagon, alarms were sounding as security personnel scrambled to respond to the unprecedented breach. Defense Secretary William Richards stared out his window at the hovering fighter jet, his face ashen. "Get Deputy Director Hayes on the line," he barked to his aide. "Now." But Hayes was already calling, her voice tight with barely controlled panic. "Mr. Secretary, I can explain." "Explain what, Victoria?" "How a dead pilot is flying an F-35 over my office. How she just prevented a terrorist attack that somehow our entire intelligence apparatus missed. Or perhaps you'd like to explain why she's accusing us of being willing to let Americans die to cover up your operations." "Sir, Anderson is delusional. She—" "Save it," Richards cut in. "I'm looking at evidence she's released to every major news organization. Bank transfers to Iranian front companies. Weapons shipments that disappeared from our inventory and reappeared in terrorist hands. Your signature, Victoria. Your authorization." Hayes fell silent for a moment. "What are your orders, sir?" Richards watched the F-35 hovering outside his window, a physical manifestation of a decade of secrets suddenly exposed to daylight. "No orders, Victoria. Not anymore. I'm invoking Protocol Black Shield." Hayes's sharp intake of breath was audible even over the phone. "Sir, that protocol is only for exactly this situation, when the chain of command itself may be compromised, when we need to determine who can still be trusted." Richards's voice hardened. "Report to the Situation Room. Bring everything you have on Anderson. Everything. If there's even a shred of truth to her accusations, God help you." Outside, Sarah continued her broadcast, not just to the Pentagon but to news organizations across the country. "For 10 years, I've gathered evidence of weapons being diverted to enemy forces, of intelligence being manipulated to justify unnecessary conflicts, of whistleblowers being silenced through assassination disguised as accidents. Today, that evidence is in the hands of journalists, congressional oversight committees, and foreign allies." She brought the F-35 lower, its advanced engines allowing it to hover just 100 feet above the Pentagon's central courtyard. "I'm here to speak directly with Defense Secretary Richards and Joint Chiefs Chairman General Monroe. No intermediaries, no handlers. Just the truth, face to face." In the Situation Room, rapid-fire discussions were underway as military and civilian leadership tried to process the unprecedented situation. "We can't just invite a rogue pilot into the Pentagon," argued the Air Force Chief of Staff. "That rogue pilot just prevented a dirty bomb from detonating in Manhattan," countered the FBI director. "And the evidence she's released appears legitimate. Our analysts are still verifying, but initial assessment suggests these documents are authentic." Secretary Richards made his decision. "Clear the North Helipad. Authorize her to land. Full security protocol, but no hostile actions. I want to hear what she has to say." "Sir," protested a general, "with respect, we can't allow—" "Can't allow what, General Harris?" Richards fixed him with a hard stare. "Can't allow the truth, because right now, there's a pilot out there who was declared dead a decade ago, flying one of our most advanced aircraft, with evidence that suggests elements within our own government had been selling weapons to our enemies. So tell me, what exactly can't we allow?" The room fell silent. Richards nodded curtly. "As I thought. Clear the helipad." Back in the F-35, Sarah received the clearance to land. "They've agreed to meet," she told Collins. "This is where it gets complicated. More complicated than flying a supposedly dead pilot into restricted airspace in a hijacked fighter jet?" Sarah actually smiled. "Politics is always more complicated than combat, Major." She guided the aircraft down with precision, settling it onto the helipad with barely a sound. Immediately, they were surrounded by heavily armed security personnel, their weapons raised but not yet aimed directly at the aircraft. "Remember," Sarah said as she prepared to open the canopy, "no matter what happens, the evidence is already out there. They can't bury it again." Collins nodded, her expression resolute. "I'll back your play, Captain. Whatever comes." The canopy slid open, and Sarah Anderson emerged into the sunlight for the first time in 10 years as herself, not a ghost, not a shadow, but as the Air Force captain who had supposedly died in service to her country. She stood tall in the cockpit, her auburn hair catching the light, her posture unflinching despite the weapons trained in her direction. "Captain Anderson," called a senior officer approaching the aircraft. "I'm General Monroe, chairman of the Joint Chiefs. Secretary Richards is waiting inside." Sarah surveyed the security formation with a professional eye. "And will I be meeting him as a guest or a prisoner, General?" "That depends entirely on whether your evidence is as compelling as you claim." Sarah climbed down from the aircraft, Major Collins following close behind. "The evidence speaks for itself, General. The question is whether anyone is still willing to listen." They were escorted through secure corridors, passing startled staffers who had never seen the Pentagon's security protocols activated at this level. The very air seemed charged with tension as they approached the Secretary's private conference room. Inside, Defense Secretary Richards waited, flanked by the FBI Director and the Attorney General. Conspicuously absent was Deputy Director Hayes. "Captain Anderson," Richards began, his tone formal but not hostile, "you've made some extraordinary claims today. Claims that, if true, represent one of the most significant breaches of trust in American military history." Sarah met his gaze without flinching. "With respect, Mr. Secretary, they aren't claims. They're facts, documented with evidence that I've spent 10 years collecting. Evidence that shows a systematic effort to sell American weapons to enemies, to eliminate anyone who discovered the operation, and to protect those responsible regardless of the cost to national security." "And where is Deputy Director Hayes?" the FBI director asked. "If your security protocols are functioning, she should be in custody by now," Sarah replied. "The evidence I've released includes direct communications between Hayes and Iranian intelligence, arranging for weapons to be diverted from American stockpiles. It includes her authorization for my elimination when I discovered the operation during a reconnaissance mission over Iranian territory." Richards exchanged glances with the Attorney General, who nodded almost imperceptibly. "She's been detained," Richards confirmed, "along with 3 members of Congress, 2 defense contractors, and several senior military officers. But Captain, what I still don't understand is how you survived. The crash report, the investigation, everything indicated your aircraft was lost over the Persian Gulf." "Because that's what they wanted you to believe," Sarah replied. She activated a small device she'd brought with her, projecting classified footage onto the wall. "This is the actual flight recorder data from my mission, not the altered version that was presented to the investigation committee." The footage showed Sarah's F-35 detecting a missile lock from a ship that wasn't supposed to be in her operational area, an American vessel. "They tried to shoot me down using our own naval assets, registered under a black budget program that didn't officially exist. When that failed, they remotely accessed the aircraft's systems using a back door that Hayes' team had installed in all the prototype F-35s. The footage continued, showing how Sarah had managed to regain control of the aircraft just long enough to fake a crash trajectory while actually flying feet above the water, using the F-35's stealth capabilities to disappear from radar. I managed to reach a contingency landing site in Oman, where I had allies, people who had also discovered pieces of the conspiracy but didn't yet have enough evidence to expose it. They helped me disappear, and for 10 years I've been gathering what we needed to bring down the entire network." The room was silent as the implications sank in. Finally, the Attorney General spoke. "Captain Anderson, what you've shown us, what you've released to the media, is enough to justify prosecutions at the highest levels. But why now? Why risk exposing yourself today?" Sarah's expression hardened. "Because they were escalating. The weapon shipments were increasing. 3 more whistleblowers were eliminated in the past year alone. And then we intercepted communications about the dirty bomb plot in New York, a plot they knew about but were planning to let succeed. She placed a secure drive on the table. This contains intelligence that Hayes' team intercepted 2 weeks ago. Detailed plans for the attack, the identities of the terrorists, the location of the device. They had everything they needed to prevent it, but instead, they monitored it, waiting for the right moment to use it as a distraction." The FBI director took the drive, his expression grim. "If this is accurate, it is," Sarah confirmed. and it proves that Hayes and her collaborators were willing to sacrifice American civilians to protect their operation. That crossed a line I couldn't ignore, even if it meant exposing myself. Secretary Richards studied Sarah for a long moment, then looked to Major Collins, who had remained silent throughout the exchange. "And you, Major? You were caught in the middle of this. What's your assessment?" Collins straightened. "Sir, 24 hours ago, I would have said this was impossible. That our systems had too many checks and balances for this kind of conspiracy to exist. But I've seen the evidence. I have witnessed Captain Anderson prevent an attack that our own intelligence agencies should have stopped. And I've seen classified capabilities in the F-35 that were never disclosed to operational pilots." She took a breath. "So my assessment, sir, is that Captain Anderson is telling the truth, and that we have a duty to ensure that truth is fully exposed, no matter how high it reaches." Richards nodded slowly, then pressed a button on the conference table. "Colonel, please escort Deputy Director Hayes to my office, and inform the President that I'll be briefing him within the hour on a matter of national security that requires his immediate attention." He turned back to Sarah. "Captain Anderson, for 10 years you've been declared dead. That status is hereby revoked. As of this moment, you are reinstated to active duty, with the rank of Major, pending a full review of your service record and the circumstances of your disappearance." Sarah blinked, clearly not expecting this development. "Sir, the evidence you've provided will be thoroughly investigated. Those responsible will face justice, but the country still needs people like you. People willing to risk everything to protect what America truly stands for." He stood, extending his hand. "Welcome back to the land of the living, Major Anderson." Sarah hesitated, then took his hand. "Thank you, Mr. Secretary. But there's one more thing you should know." "What's that?" "I wasn't working alone. There are others, pilots, intelligence officers, special forces operators, who discovered pieces of this conspiracy and were forced to disappear. People whose deaths were faked, or who went into deep cover to stay alive while gathering evidence." Richards's eyebrows rose. "How many?" "Enough to form a shadow agency," Sarah replied. "We call ourselves Phoenix, because we all rose from the ashes of careers that were destroyed when we discovered the truth." The Attorney General leaned forward. "And where are these people now?" "Scattered, hidden, but ready to return if they can be assured they won't face reprisals for doing the right thing." Richards exchanged glances with the FBI director and the Attorney General. After a moment of silent communication, he turned back to Sarah. "Make contact. Tell them their country needs them. Tell them it's time to come home." As Sarah and Collins were escorted out of the conference room, they passed a grim-faced Deputy Director Hayes being led in the opposite direction, flanked by armed guards. Hayes locked eyes with Sarah for a brief moment, her expression a mixture of shock and hatred.
"You're supposed to be dead,"
Hayes hissed. Sarah regarded her former superior coolly. "I was. Now it's your turn to disappear." Outside, on the Pentagon helipad, Sarah paused before climbing back into the F-35. The Washington Monument stood in the distance, a silent sentinel that had witnessed the entire history of America's grand experiment in democracy, its triumphs and its failures, its moments of darkness and its returns to light. "What happens now?" Collins asked, looking out over the Capitol. "Now," Sarah said, "we rebuild, we find the others, we bring them home, and we make sure this never happens again." "That's a tall order." "Freedom always is, Major." Sarah turned back to the aircraft, running her hand along its sleek surface. "That's why it's worth fighting for, even when the fight seems impossible." As they prepared to depart, Sarah's secure phone buzzed with an incoming message. She checked it, a slow smile spreading across her face. "What is it?" Collins asked. "They're coming in," Sarah replied, showing her the message. "Phoenix is rising. All across the country, our people are making contact. Operation Homecoming is a go." She climbed into the cockpit, feeling truly alive for the first time in a decade. The F-35 responded to her touch like an old friend welcoming her back, its systems humming with readiness. "Tower, this is Phoenix 1, requesting clearance for departure." "Phoenix 1, this is Pentagon Tower. You are cleared for departure. Godspeed, Major Anderson." The F-35 rose from the helipad, its engines barely whispering as it climbed into the clear blue sky. Below them, Washington, D.C. spread out like a map of American power. The White House, the Capitol, the Supreme Court. Institutions built on the promise of freedom and justice. Institutions that had been corrupted but could be reclaimed. Sarah banked the aircraft toward the west, toward the hidden facility where the rest of her team waited for news. Phoenix Nest, this is Phoenix 1, she radioed. Mission accomplished. Resurrection protocol complete. Begin Operation Homecoming. Copy that, Phoenix 1, came the reply. The nest is ready. The ghosts are coming home. Collins watched as Sarah flew with a confidence and precision that came from something deeper than training. A conviction that what they were doing mattered, that truth itself was worth any sacrifice. Tell me about the others, Collins said. The rest of Phoenix. Sarah's eyes remained focused on the horizon, but her expression softened slightly. They're like me. People who discovered pieces of the conspiracy and had to make impossible choices. A Navy SEAL who found evidence of weapons being diverted to terrorist groups in Africa. An intelligence analyst who traced financial transactions to congressmen on the Defense Committee. A diplomat who stumbled onto secret meetings between Hayes's people and Iranian arms dealers. And they all had to die to stay alive, Collins said, understanding dawning. Exactly. Some were targeted directly, like me. Others saw what happened to whistleblowers and chose to disappear before they could be silenced. We found each other gradually, building a network dedicated to exposing the truth no matter how long it took. The F-35 streaked across America, its stealth systems ensuring they remained invisible to conventional radar. Below them, the countryside unfolded in a patchwork of farms and forests, towns and highways, the nation they had sworn to protect, even from itself. How many are there? Collins asked. 37, Sarah replied. 37 ghosts, each with a piece of the puzzle. Together, we have enough evidence to expose corruption that spans 3 administrations, both political parties and dozens of private contractors. And what happens to Phoenix once the truth is out? Sarah considered the question. That depends on what America does with the truth. If there's real accountability, if the system proves it can heal itself, then maybe we can all come back from the dead permanently. They flew in silence for a while, each lost in her own thoughts. Finally, Collins spoke again. You know, they'll try to bury it again. There are too many powerful people implicated. They'll claim national security, they'll classify evidence, they'll discredit witnesses. They'll try, Sarah agreed. But this time, we've made sure the evidence is too widespread to suppress. Every major news organization has copies. Foreign allies have been briefed. And most importantly, the American people will know. She adjusted their course slightly, beginning their descent toward the hidden facility in the Nevada desert. That's the one thing these conspirators never understood, Major. They thought that by controlling information they could control reality. But truth has a power all its own. It may be buried for a time, it may be twisted or obscured, but eventually it finds the light. The desert facility came into view, its camouflaged runway appearing as Sarah transmitted the recognition code. Other aircraft were visible now, a mix of military and civilian planes that had brought Phoenix operatives from across the country, people emerging from deep cover to stand together for the first time. They're all here, Sarah said, her voice carrying a hint of wonder. Everyone made it. Collins understood the significance. 10 years of hiding. 10 years of gathering evidence, of staying one step ahead of people who thought they'd killed you. And today, it finally paid off. Sarah nodded as she guided the F-35 to a perfect landing on the hidden runway. Today is just the beginning, Major. The hard part comes next, rebuilding what was broken, restoring faith in institutions that lost their way, holding accountable those who betrayed their oaths. As they taxied toward the waiting group of Phoenix operatives, Collins saw something she hadn't expected. Not hardened conspirators or bitter exiles, but men and women who stood tall, many still wearing pieces of the uniforms they'd once been forced to abandon. People who, despite everything they'd endured, still believed in the country they had sworn to serve. The F-35 came to a stop, and Sarah powered down the engines. Before opening the canopy, she turned to Collins. There's a place for you in Phoenix if you want it. We need people who still believe in what America can be, not just what it is. People willing to fight for that vision, even when the fight seems impossible. Collins didn't hesitate. I'm in. The canopy slid open, and Sarah Anderson stepped out into the sunlight, no longer a ghost but a leader returning to her people. A cheer went up from the assembled Phoenix operatives, a sound of triumph, of vindication, of hope reborn after a decade of darkness. As Sarah approached the group, a tall man with silver-streaked hair stepped forward. "Welcome home, Captain," he said, snapping a crisp salute. Sarah returned the salute, then pulled him into a tight embrace. "It's Major now, apparently," she said with a smile. "And it's good to be back, Commander." She turned to address the entire group, her voice carrying across the desert air with the authority of someone who had faced the impossible and prevailed. 10 years ago, each of us made a choice. To disappear rather than be silenced, to gather evidence rather than accept defeat, to believe that someday the truth would matter more than power. Today, we've proven that choice was right. The assembled operatives drew closer, their faces showing the weight of years spent in hiding, but also the relief of vindication. "But our work isn't finished," Sarah continued. "We've exposed the conspiracy, but now we need to help rebuild what was damaged. America needs us. Not as ghosts, but as patriots willing to stand in the light and fight for the principles we've always believed in." She gestured to Collins, who had joined them from the aircraft. "This is Major Samantha Collins. Today, she witnessed our evidence, helped prevent a terrorist attack, and chose to stand with us even when it meant questioning everything she thought she knew about the chain of command. She represents what we're fighting for, the courage to face truth no matter how difficult." Collins felt the eyes of the Phoenix operatives on her, men and women who had sacrificed everything for a principle. It was humbling and inspiring all at once. "Operation Homecoming begins now," Sarah announced. "Each of you has been officially reinstated, your deaths revoked, your records restored. The President has authorized a special task force operating with congressional oversight to continue the investigation and prosecution of everyone involved in the conspiracy." Quote, a murmur of amazement passed through the group. After years of hiding, of fighting from the shadows, they were being welcomed back. "Not everyone will face justice," Sarah acknowledged, her tone sobering. "Some are too powerful, too protected by the system they corrupted. But enough will fall to send a message that in America, no one is above the law. That truth, however inconvenient, cannot be buried forever. That some secrets are too important to stay hidden, especially when they threaten the very foundation of what we stand for." As the sun began to set over the Nevada desert, casting long shadows across the hidden facility, the members of Phoenix gathered around maps and computers, planning their return to the world they had been forced to leave behind. There were families to contact, identities to reclaim, truths to tell. Sarah found a quiet moment alone, stepping outside to watch the fading light paint the desert in shades of gold and crimson. Collins joined her, respecting her silence for a moment before speaking. "What you did, what all of you did, it's going to change everything." Sarah nodded, her gaze fixed on the horizon. "That's the hope. Not just exposing what went wrong, but showing what's still right. Proving that even when the system fails, there are people willing to sacrifice everything to fix it." She turned to Collins, her expression reflective. "You know, when I first discovered the conspiracy, I thought I was alone. That one person couldn't possibly stand against something so vast, so deeply entrenched. But then I found others, people who had seen the same corruption, who had made the same choice to fight back. And now? Now I understand that's how change has always happened. Not all at once, not with grand gestures, but through the cumulative effect of individuals who refuse to accept what's wrong, who believe so deeply in what's right that they're willing to risk everything for it." The last light of day caught the F-35 sitting on the runway, transforming its matte gray surface into burnished gold. The aircraft that had once been part of a conspiracy was now a symbol of redemption, proof that what was built for war could also serve the cause of justice. "Tomorrow," Sarah said, "we fly to Washington again, not in secret, not as ghosts, but as witnesses to history. The world will know what happened, and why, and who was responsible." "And after that?" Collins asked. Sarah smiled. a genuine smile that reached her eyes for perhaps the first time since her resurrection. "After that, Major, we get to do something I haven't done in 10 years. "What's that?" "Live." As night fell over the desert, the members of Phoenix prepared for their return from the dead. They were no longer ghosts haunting the conscience of a nation that had betrayed them, but living, breathing reminders that some truths cannot be buried, that some pilots refuse to stay shot down, and that in America, even after the darkest night, the dawn always comes. 6 months after a dead woman landed an F-35 on the Pentagon helipad, Major Sarah Anderson sat in a Senate hearing room, facing a panel of lawmakers who were still struggling to comprehend the magnitude of what her evidence had revealed. The hearings had been going on for weeks, each session peeling back another layer of corruption that had infected the highest levels of the military-industrial complex. The room was packed with journalists, family members of service personnel who had died under suspicious circumstances, and veterans who had spent years wondering why their missions had been classified beyond reason. Sarah wore her dress blue uniform, the same one she had been stripped of 10 years earlier, with her newly reinstated medals prominently displayed alongside ribbons for classified operations that could finally be acknowledged. Senator Olivia Marshall, the committee chair, leaned forward in her seat. "Major Anderson, your testimony has fundamentally changed how we understand covert operations and oversight. But I have to ask, do you regret the methods you used to expose this conspiracy?" Sarah considered the question carefully. Behind her, she could see Major Collins, now Lieutenant Colonel Collins, who had been promoted after her role in exposing the truth. Beside Collins sat other Phoenix operatives, men and women who had been silenced over the years but were finally able to tell their stories. "Senator, I spent 10 years living as a ghost because speaking the truth would have meant imprisonment or death. I watched as criminals hid behind national security classifications, while families grieved loved ones who died protecting evidence of treason. I saw weapons that American taxpayers funded being sold to enemies who would use them against American soldiers." She paused, her voice steady but carrying the weight of years spent in exile. "Do I regret using dramatic methods to expose that conspiracy? No, ma'am. I regret that dramatic methods were necessary." In the gallery, Victoria Hayes, former CIA deputy director, watched the proceedings in handcuffs, flanked by federal marshals. She would be sentenced next week for her role in the conspiracy, joining her former associates in a federal prison designed for high-security inmates. 3 members of Congress had already resigned, and 2 defense contractors had been dissolved as criminal enterprises. But the real victory, Sarah knew, wasn't in the prosecutions or the congressional investigations. It was in the changes that were already being implemented throughout the military and intelligence communities. The Phoenix Protocol, the authorization that had allowed Sarah to act independently, was being expanded to protect other whistleblowers. New oversight mechanisms were being created to prevent the kind of corruption that had flourished in the shadows. And most importantly, a new generation of service members was learning that their oath to the Constitution superseded any order from any superior officer. Senator Marshall continued her questioning. "Major, what's next for you? After everything you've been through, where do you see your service taking you?" Sarah smiled, and for the first time in 10 years, it was the smile of someone who had finally found peace. "Senator, I've been assigned to lead a new oversight division within Air Force Special Operations. My job will be to make sure that what happened to me never happens to anyone else, to ensure that service members who discover evidence of wrongdoing have a path to report it without fear of retaliation." She stood up, her testimony complete, and looked out at the gallery filled with faces of people whose lives had been changed by her decision to return from the dead. "The shadows are full of heroes, Senator. People who served with honor in missions that couldn't be acknowledged, who sacrificed everything for operations that officially never happened. Today we start bringing them into the light." As Sarah left the hearing room, she was approached by a young Air Force lieutenant who had been watching the proceedings with rapt attention. "Ma'am," the lieutenant said, "I just wanted to thank you. I'm a pilot, and knowing that someone like you fought for the truth means everything." Sarah looked at the young woman and saw herself 15 years earlier, idealistic, dedicated, ready to serve her country with honor. But this pilot would never have to choose between her conscience and her career. She would never have to fake her own death to protect evidence of corruption. She would serve in an Air Force that had learned, through Sarah's sacrifice, that the truth was more important than convenient lies. "Lieutenant," Sarah said, "just remember your oath, not to any individual, not to any administration, but to the Constitution. And if you ever find yourself in a position where telling the truth puts you at risk, remember that there are people who will stand with you." Outside the Capitol, Sarah was met by Colonel James Harrington, the former Navy SEAL who had been the first to join her in exile, the man who had helped build Phoenix from a desperate idea into a network that had ultimately saved thousands of lives. "How'd it go in there?" he asked as they walked down the Capitol steps. "About as well as could be expected," Sarah replied. "They want to understand, but some of this is still beyond their comprehension. The idea that people they trusted, people they confirmed to high office, could betray everything America stands for." Harrington nodded grimly. "It's always the hardest lesson, not that enemies exist, but that sometimes they wear the same uniform you do." They reached the bottom of the steps, where a group of Phoenix operatives waited, men and women who had emerged from the shadows over the past 6 months, each with their own story of discovery, threat, and exile. Some had been declared killed in action, others listed as deserters. A few simply vanished from the records, as if they had never existed at all. Now they stood together in the sunlight, no longer ghosts but living testaments to the resilience of truth. "Is everyone ready?" Sarah asked. A woman in her 50s, Dr. Elaine Winters, formerly of DARPA, nodded. "The President is waiting. This is the day we've been working toward for 10 years. The Phoenix team made their way to the White House, where unprecedented security measures had been implemented. Not because these former ghosts were considered threats, but because what they represented, the systematic exposure of corruption at the highest levels, had created enemies who would still do anything to silence them. In the Oval Office, President Gabrielle Chen was waiting, along with a select group of military and intelligence leaders who had been thoroughly vetted over the past 6 months. Leaders who could be trusted with the final piece of the Phoenix mission. "Major Anderson," the president greeted Sarah, or should I say, Colonel Anderson. "Your promotion is effective as of this morning." Sarah blinked in surprise. "Madam President, You've earned it," Chen said firmly. "What you and your team have accomplished, exposing the conspiracy, preventing the New York attack, helping us root out corruption that had infected every branch of government. It's unprecedented. But I understand there's more?" Sarah exchanged glances with her team, then nodded. "Yes, Madam President. There's one final piece of the puzzle that we've kept secure until we could be certain the system was ready to receive it." Dr. Winters stepped forward, carrying a secure case. "Madam President, what we're about to show you goes beyond the weapons trafficking and the assassination of whistleblowers. It reveals the ultimate objective of the conspiracy, the reason they were willing to risk everything." She opened the case, revealing a collection of drives and documents. 10 years ago, a small group of officials, defense contractors, and intelligence operatives discovered something that changed everything. Evidence of advanced technology that could give America an insurmountable advantage in any conflict. "What kind of technology?" asked the National Security Advisor. Harrington took over. "The kind that rewrites the rules of warfare. Directed energy weapons capable of disabling any electronic system from orbit. Autonomous combat systems that can operate without human control. Surveillance technology that can penetrate any encryption, any security measure. These technologies were developed in black sites, funded through programs so classified that even congressional oversight committees weren't aware of them," Sarah explained. "When they were tested successfully, the group controlling them realized they had a choice. Turn them over to proper military and civilian leadership, or keep them secret and use them to pursue their own agenda. They chose the latter," Dr. Winters continued. "They began selling conventional weapons to fund their secret research, eliminating anyone who discovered what they were doing, and positioning themselves to eventually deploy these technologies not just against America's enemies, but against any part of the government that might try to rein them in." The president leaned back in her chair, her expression grave. "You're describing a coup. A slow-motion coup," Sarah confirmed. "Not with tanks in the streets, but with invisible technologies that could disable communications, control information flow, and eliminate opposition without anyone understanding what was happening." She placed a drive on the president's desk. This contains the location of every black site facility, every piece of advanced technology, every research program. We've kept it secure, waiting until we could be certain the legitimate chain of command was restored. President Chen looked at the assembled Phoenix operatives with newfound understanding. So that's why you stayed hidden for so long. Not just to gather evidence of past crimes, but to prevent something much worse. Yes, Madam President, Harrington said. The weapons trafficking, the elimination of whistleblowers, those were symptoms. The disease was the belief that a small group had the right to control technologies that could fundamentally alter the balance of power, not just between nations, but between citizens and their government. The president picked up the drive, weighing it in her hand, as if measuring its importance. What do you recommend we do with this information? Sarah stepped forward. With respect, Madam President, that's why we've come to you. These technologies exist. They can't be uninvented, but they can be brought under proper civilian and military control, with appropriate oversight and ethical guidelines. Some of these technologies could save American lives in conflict zones, Dr. Winters added. Others could protect critical infrastructure from attack. Used properly, they represent advancement, not threat. President Chen was silent for a long moment, considering the implications. Finally, she looked up at the Phoenix team. You've done something extraordinary, she said. Not just exposing corruption, but preserving these technologies until they could be properly handled. I won't pretend to have immediate answers about how to proceed, but I can promise you this. We will do it right. With full oversight, with ethical boundaries, with respect for the Constitution and the rule of law. She stood, extending her hand to Sarah. Colonel Anderson, I'd like you and your team to lead this transition. You've earned the right to see this through, to ensure that what you fought for, what you sacrificed for, results in progress that honors American values rather than undermines them. Later that evening, Sarah stood on the balcony of the temporary housing where the Phoenix operatives had been staying during the hearings. The Washington Monument was visible in the distance, illuminated against the night sky, a reminder of the ideals that had inspired a nation. Colonel Collins joined her, leaning against the railing. Quite a day, Sarah nodded. The beginning of something new. Are you ready for this? Leading the integration of these technologies, going back to a normal life after 10 years in the shadows? I'm not sure there is a normal after what we've been through, Sarah replied. But I'm ready to try. We all are. Below them, in the common area, other Phoenix operatives were gathered, some reconnecting with family members who had believed them dead, others making plans for futures they had never expected to have. Their laughter drifted up to the balcony, a sound of liberation that Sarah had waited 10 years to hear. You know, Colin said, when I got into that F-35 with you 6 months ago, I thought it was the end of my career. Turns out it was just the beginning of something better. That's how it works sometimes, Sarah said. The moments that seem like endings are really doorways to something we couldn't have imagined. The next morning, the Phoenix team gathered at Andrews Air Force Base, where a transport was waiting to take them to the first of the black sites, a facility hidden deep in the Appalachian Mountains where some of the most advanced directed energy weapons had been developed. As they prepared to board, Sarah noticed a young sergeant staring at her with an expression of awe. She'd seen that look often in the past 6 months, the mixture of respect and disbelief that greeted the woman who had returned from the dead to save her country. Something on your mind, Sergeant? She asked. The young man straightened. Ma'am, how did you do it? 10 years in hiding, knowing that powerful people wanted you dead, gathering evidence that might never see the light of day. How did you keep going? Sarah considered the question thoughtfully. It wasn't the first time she'd been asked, but she still searched for the right words to express what had driven her through those long years of exile. I believed in something larger than myself, she finally said. Not just America as a place or an idea, but as a promise, a commitment to certain principles that are worth fighting for, even when the fight seems impossible. She glanced at the other Phoenix operatives, each of whom had made the same choice, faced the same hardships. None of us did it alone. That's the secret they never understood. The people who tried to bury us. They thought that by isolating us, by declaring us dead or traitors or delusional, they could break our resolve. But instead, we found each other. We built something together that was stronger than what any of us could have accomplished alone. The sergeant nodded slowly, absorbing her words. "Thank you, ma'am." As he walked away, Harrington approached. "Inspiring the next generation already?" "Just telling the truth," Sarah replied. "Something we've gotten pretty good at." They boarded the transport, and as the aircraft lifted off, Sarah looked down at the Capitol receding beneath them. From this height, Washington, D.C. looked peaceful, orderly, its monuments and buildings arranged with precise geometry, a physical manifestation of the ideals that had guided American democracy for over 2 centuries. But Sarah knew better than most that those ideals required constant defense, that the true strength of a nation lay not in its weapons or its wealth, but in the courage of individuals willing to stand for what was right, even at terrible personal cost. The transport banked west, toward the hidden facility where they would begin the work of bringing secret technologies into the light of democratic oversight. As mountains rose in the distance, Sarah thought about the journey that had brought her here, from a young pilot discovering uncomfortable truths, to a ghost gathering evidence in the shadows, to a leader helping rebuild what had been broken. It hadn't been the life she'd imagined when she first earned her wings, but looking at her team, these men and women who had sacrificed everything for the truth, she knew it had been a life of purpose, a life that mattered. 3 weeks later, Sarah stood in an underground hangar, watching as engineers prepared to demonstrate one of the most advanced technologies developed by the Black programs, a defensive shield capable of neutralizing incoming missiles without destructive countermeasures. Dr. Winters joined her, clipboard in hand. "The integration is proceeding ahead of schedule. We've identified 27 technologies that can be immediately transitioned to proper military control, with full congressional oversight." "And the rest?" Sarah asked. "Some need further development before they're ready for deployment. Others require ethical frameworks that don't yet exist. We're establishing review boards with military, civilian, scientific, and ethical experts to evaluate each one." Sarah nodded, satisfied. This was how it should have been done from the beginning, with transparency, with oversight, with respect for the democratic processes that separated America from its adversaries. A young lieutenant approached, saluting crisply. "Colonel Anderson, the Joint Chiefs are ready for your briefing." "Thank you, Lieutenant. I'll be right there." As the officer departed, Dr. Winters gave Sarah a knowing look. "Still getting used to people saluting you instead of shooting at you?" "It's an adjustment," Sarah admitted with a small smile. She made her way to the briefing room, where the military's highest-ranking officers waited to hear about technologies that, until recently, they hadn't known existed. Technologies that could have been used against them if Sarah and her team hadn't intervened. As she prepared to present, Sarah thought about how far they had come. 6 months ago, she had been a ghost, presumed dead, fighting a shadow war against corruption that had infected the highest levels of government. Now she stood before the Joint Chiefs, not as an outsider or a threat, but as a leader helping to chart a new course. "Gentlemen, ladies," she began, "what I'm about to show you represents both opportunity and challenge. These technologies have the potential to save American lives, to protect our infrastructure, to advance our security interests without unnecessary bloodshed." She activated the display, showing the first of many systems that would be discussed that day. But they also come with great responsibility. The power they represent could easily be misused, as the conspiracy we exposed intended to misuse them. Our task is not just to understand what these technologies can do, but to ensure they are used in ways that honor our values and uphold our Constitution. The chairman of the Joint Chiefs, General Monroe, leaned forward. "Colonel Anderson, I think I speak for everyone in this room when I say we understand the gravity of what you're presenting. What happened to you and your team? Being forced into exile for discovering the truth, it's a stain on our collective honor. We're committed to ensuring it never happens again." Sarah nodded, grateful for the acknowledgement. "Thank you, General. That's all we ever wanted. A military and a government worthy of the ideals they claim to defend." The briefing continued for hours, each technology raising new questions, new possibilities, new concerns. Throughout it all, Sarah maintained the balance that had guided her through 10 years in the shadows, a commitment to American security coupled with an unwavering respect for democratic principles. When it was over, she returned to her temporary office in the facility, where she found a message waiting, an invitation to the White House for a special ceremony the following week. President Chin was establishing a new medal, the Phoenix Honor, recognizing service members who had made extraordinary sacrifices to uphold their oath to the Constitution. Sarah and her team would be the first recipients. She set the invitation aside and turned to the window, looking out at the mountain landscape surrounding the facility. Somewhere beyond those peaks, America continued its daily life, citizens going about their business, secure in the systems and principles that govern their nation, unaware of how close those systems had come to being subverted. That was as it should be. The best victories were often invisible, threats neutralized before they materialized, corruption exposed before it could take root, principles defended before they could be undermined. A knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. Colonel Collins entered, carrying a secure tablet. "We just received word from the team at the Nevada site," she reported. "They've completed the inventory of all aircraft and technology stored there. Everything matches your records." Sarah nodded. "Good. What about the personnel files?" "Also complete. We've identified 47 additional service members who were silenced over the years, some reassigned to remote postings, others forced into early retirement, a few who simply disappeared. The review committee is examining each case. Make sure they understand. This isn't about retribution. It's about restoration. These people deserve to have their records cleared, their service acknowledged." Collins nodded. "Absolutely, ma'am." After Collins departed, Sarah returned to the window, watching as the sun began to set behind the mountains. 10 years ago, she had made a choice that altered the course of her life: to disappear rather than be silenced, to fight from the shadows rather than surrender to corruption. It had been a lonely path, filled with hardship and danger. There had been moments of doubt, times when she wondered if the truth would ever matter more than power, if the sacrifice was worth the uncertain outcome. But standing here now, seeing the results of that choice, a conspiracy exposed, technology secured, democratic oversight restored, she knew she would make the same decision again, because some principles transcended personal comfort. Some truths were worth any sacrifice. Some fights could not be abandoned no matter the odds. The last light of day caught the edge of an F-35 parked on the facility's runway, transforming its matte gray surface into burnished gold. The aircraft that had once been part of a conspiracy was now a symbol of redemption, proof that what was built for war could also serve the cause of justice. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, technologies to evaluate, systems to create, trust to rebuild. The work of democracy was never finished, the defense of principles never complete. But for the first time in a decade, Sarah faced that work not as a ghost fighting from the shadows, but as a leader standing in the light. The woman who had been declared killed in action had not only returned from the dead, she had brought with her a reckoning, a revelation, and ultimately, a renewal of the values that had first inspired her to serve. As darkness fell over the mountains, Sarah Anderson, pilot, whistleblower, phoenix risen from the ashes, turned away from the window and toward the future she had fought to make possible. Not just for herself, but for every service member who would follow. For every citizen who depended on people of courage to defend not just American soil but American ideals. The conspiracy had failed, the truth had prevailed, and the pilot who refused to stay shot down had shown that even after the darkest flight, there remained the possibility of return, not just to life, but to something greater, the chance to build a world more just than the one she had left behind. 10 years dead, now forever alive in the annals of those who had placed principle above power, truth above comfort, and the Constitution above command. This was Sarah Anderson's legacy, not just a story of resurrection, but a testament to the enduring power of courage in the face of corruption, of conviction in the presence of compromise, of light penetrating even the deepest shadows of power. The fighter pilot had come home, and America was stronger for her return. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.